Hello, I'm Greg Lee, the HIV/AIDS Continuing Education Director with the Kentucky Department for Public Health. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate how simply you can incorporate rapid HIV testing into the 6-step HIV prevention counseling protocol as prescribed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The 6 steps to CDC's guidelines can be easily remembered by using the acronym CIGARS, where C stands for Client Introduction, I is for Identify Risks, G is for Go Behaviors, A is for Action Plan, R is for Referrals, and S is for Summarize. After the counselor covers the first 4 steps, we'll see the counseling session end in 2 different ways. In the first example, we'll see the patient getting negative results. After that, we'll see the patient getting preliminary positive results.
Hi there, my name is Rachel and I'm an HIV prevention counselor. What would you like for me to call you today?
Hi Rachel, I'm Rick.
Hi Rick, it's very nice to meet you. I understand that you're here today for an HIV screening?
Yes.
Okay, great. We can absolutely take care of that for you today. So what we're going to do is we have about 20 minutes to talk about HIV prevention and safer sex techniques. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about why you came in to get tested today?
Well, I don't really think that I have HIV. I just kind of came in here because I want to be sure.
Okay, absolutely. And how familiar are you with the HIV test?
Well, I've been tested before. It was about 3 years ago. I know that these tests look for HIV antibodies, and that if I do have HIV, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have AIDS, at least not yet.
Okay, absolutely correct. And I'm assuming that your last test came back as negative?
Yeah, and it was so nerve-wracking. The worst part was having to wait 2 weeks for those results.
I definitely understand that can be very frustrating. Well, fortunately, the test that we're doing today is a rapid test, so you'll actually leave here with your results today. It's only going to take about 20 minutes, and what we're going to do in that time is talk a little bit about HIV prevention and safer sex techniques. If that sounds like something you're interested in, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Alrighty, let's get started.
At this point, the counselor performs the rapid HIV test according to directions and answers any questions that the client might have about testing. While the results are developing, it's a good idea to cover the test device with a box or to turn it around so that it is not visible. Now let's resume watching Rachel and see how she uses open-ended questions to help understand the client's risks.
Okay, Rick, so before we continue with the rest of the session, I just wanted to let you know that anything that you choose to share with me today will remain completely confidential. Now, the only exception to that rule is if you disclose to me that you intend to harm yourself or you've been involved with child abuse in any way, okay?
Okay.
All right, so why don't we get started by talking about what you feel your risks for HIV are?
Well, my friend Denise actually is the one who taught me to come in. I use condoms pretty frequently, so I think I'm okay, but I'm here just because I want to be sure.
Okay, and is Denise your girlfriend or your partner? Or?
No, she's just an old friend. We've never really been together that way.
Okay, and what is it that Denise brought up that has you so concerned about your status?
Well, I guess I just tell her a lot about my life, and she got weirded out by some things.
Okay. Well, are your sexual partners male, female, or both?
Well, just guys, but not really that much. I do have a fairly steady friend that I get together with now and then, but Danny and I always use condoms, so I'm probably all right.
Okay, well, it's really wonderful to hear that you're always using condoms with your friend Danny. Now, you just mentioned to me that maybe you had been sharing too many personal details with Denise, so she's a little bit concerned about you right now. Is it the situation with Danny that she's concerned about?
I don't think that's it, no.
Okay, what do you think her concern is for you?
We had a friend from college who tested positive a few years before I turned 30, and something about him testing positive and me being single and getting older just really made me realize how much it could have been me. And Denise said that I was panicky and that I was kind of hard to get along with, but I did get tested and I was negative.
Okay, so that was kind of an eye-opening experience for you. When was the last time you had sex with your friend who tested positive?
Well, I never had sex with him. It's just, you know, he missed my birthday party because he was in a funk after testing positive. We used to always hang out at the same clubs. Missing him on my birthday just really made me think of how easily it could have been me.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned earlier that in general you use condoms pretty frequently, but with Danny, you always use condoms. So is there something about the situation with Danny that makes him just a little bit different?
Well, Danny and I just use them automatically because he uses condoms all the time. There's no real big discussion or issue about it, and I want to be safe when I'm with others, but it hasn't always worked out that way. I do plan on using condoms always, but I don't always manage it. But you know how it goes, the more heated the moment, the more difficult it is to talk about condoms and use one.
Absolutely. So what is it about the heat of the moment that makes condoms a little bit hard to talk about for you?
I don't know. I guess that talking about condoms right before you're getting ready to do it might ruin the moment. There's just never a good time to ask about condoms, or so it seems. And plus, I don't really like condoms because it's like trying to take a shower with a raincoat on, But I'd really rather be settled down with one person anyway, and Danny's not the person, but eventually I would like to be in a long-term relationship. But, right now I'm focused on my career, and I don't drink that much, but the clubs are the only places to meet guys, really.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely hear your disappointment and your frustration with having to resort to the club scene. And you're absolutely right. It can be a lot harder to talk about condom use when you're really worked up in the moment. So the really cool thing about Danny is that it seems like he doesn't even feel the need to talk about it. He just uses condoms. I think that's a really good mentality to have.
Yeah.
So tell me about the last time that you had sex with someone without using condoms.
Well, a couple weeks ago, I met this guy named Mark, and we went back to his place. I really wanted to use condoms, but I just couldn't find the right moment to talk about it, and we just kind of got carried away.
Gotcha. So when you were with Mark, were you the bottom? Are you familiar with that terminology, the receptive partner?
Yes, I'm familiar with that term, and I did, but just for a little bit. But we did more oral than anything, but like I said, we just kind of got carried away.
Okay, well, oral sex actually has a much lower risk for HIV, so that's a pretty good technique to use. Have you considered maybe just sticking to oral sex when you go out?
I have actually, because I'm not always in the mood for anal. But I probably have more oral than anything else, to be honest.
Okay, well, like we just talked about, oral sex has a lower risk for HIV, so that's really good. One thing I did want to bring up, however, is that you just mentioned this incident was just a few nights ago, so pretty recent. It's too early at this point in time for the test to actually detect anything from just a few nights ago. The test that we're using today is an antibody test, and it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 months for HIV antibodies to show up. So if your test does come back negative today, we would recommend that you come back in 3 months to be retested, just to confirm that you truly do have a negative result. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it does, and I'll definitely do that.
Okay, great. So let's think back to the situation you just described to me from a few nights ago. Now, you mentioned that you really wanted to use condoms, but getting really worked up in the heat of the moment, it was really difficult to bring that subject up. Can you talk to me about a time where you felt that condom use was an easy discussion for you?
Well, it's always really easy with Danny because it's a given that we're going to use condoms when we go to his place. His nightstand drawer is full of them, and I know he really believes in them, so we're always going to use them. And Danny makes oral sex feel great even with a condom.
Impressive. Okay, well, that sounds really good. Now, one thing that you mentioned that I think is really interesting is that you said whenever you're at Danny's house, you always use condoms because he has them in a nightstand, they're really easily accessible, and he's always prepared. So it kind of puts him in more control of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's his house, so it's his rules.
Exactly. Now, what do you think about handling condom use in the same way that Danny does, just by bringing guys back to your own place where you have condoms that are readily accessible?
That actually sounds like a good idea that I can actually do.
Okay. And as for not liking condoms, I know that you expressed that you don't like them as much because they can diminish sensation.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, one thing you can do about that is try using lubricant. Have you used lubes in the past?
I usually just go ahead and use the condoms that are pre-lubricated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, oftentimes, there isn't enough lubricant that's already on the condoms. So one thing you can do is try using water-based lube whenever you wear condoms.
Okay.
You can even just put a little dab of water-based lubricant in the tip of the condom to kind of help with sensation.
Okay.
So that raincoat issue you talked about earlier gets resolved through that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. I'll have to try that one. Now, Danny and I use Platinum ID. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So as long as you're using a water-based lubricant, you never want to use anything that's oil-based or grease-based because that can actually break down the condom. And if you'd like, we actually have some samples of Platinum lubricants that you can take home with you today, if you're interested.
Okay.
So let's talk now a little bit about what your plan is going forward. What can you do the next time that you go out to ensure that if you're going to have sex, you do so in your own home?
Well, I guess I just need to go out with that intention. You know, sometimes I avoid bringing them back to my place to have sex if my place is a mess. That's embarrassing. So I'll be sure to tidy up the place when I leave. And usually, you know, where we go to do it hasn't been a big deal to me, but I guess it should be.
Okay, I like that idea a lot. Now what if the situation arises where the guy is insistent that he doesn't want to go back to your place? Or what if he doesn't want to use condoms? What would you kind of do in that situation?
Well, I do usually try to take a condom or two with me whenever I go out, just in case. But I guess if somebody doesn't want to use one, I can just stick to oral sex again.
Okay, that's a fair idea. Just remember that even though oral sex has a lower risk for HIV, you can still contract other sexually transmitted infections through having oral sex without condoms. Now, of course, as Danny has proven to you, you can still use condoms for oral sex and it would still feel as great. One thing that you might also consider are non-penetrative forms of intercourse. So, for example, mutual masturbation.
Okay.
That sounds like something you're interested in. By the way, would you like some condoms to take with you today?
You know what? I have plenty at home, but I will take up your offer with some of that lube.
Okay, absolutely. Now, do you have any further questions for me at this point in time?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, it's been about 20 minutes, so we can go ahead and look over your test results. Are you prepared to hear your result?
I really just want to get this over with, so.
All right. Okay, Rick, so I'm taking a look at your test results here, and you have a negative result.
Oh, that is wonderful news. Whoa.
I'm so glad to hear that that's news you wanted to hear.
Yes.
Now, the one thing I wanted to remind you of is that you do have some risks that you talked about that were pretty recent, and it does take about 3 months for antibodies to form. So we're going to recommend that you come back in 3 months to be retested and confirm your negative result. And also, most importantly, you want to make sure that you're doing everything that's possible in the meantime to ensure that you keep your risk as low as possible, okay?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely will. This is such good news. Whenever I go out, I'll be sure to have my place ready so that if I find somebody out in the club, they can come back and we'll use condoms.
Okay, absolutely. And now I understand that making these sort of changes overnight is it can be pretty difficult, so let's try to make some small achievable goals. What do you think about the next 3 times you go out and plan on bringing someone back to your place, you make sure you bring them back to your place?
I think I can do that.
Okay, sounds good. And you know, there's also a support group in town for young gay men to kind of voice their concerns about a lot of the issues that you brought in and talked to me about today. Does that sound like something you might be interested in participating in?
Not right now because I'm so busy with work, but maybe later.
Okay, so when you leave here today, what is your overall plan for being safer about sex?
My plan is to tidy up my place so it's not so dirty and I won't be ashamed to have guys come over, and then have sex only at home for the next 3 times.
Okay, and hopefully those next 3 times can kind of develop into a more of a habit. How do you feel about making condom use your house rule, kind of in the same way that Danny does?
I could live with that.
Okay, well, sounds good. Do you have any more questions for me today? Is there anything else I can help you with?
No?
Okay, now don't forget, we'd like to see you back in here in 3 months to be retested. You can feel free to call me at any point, and I'll get those lubricant samples for you. Thank you very much for coming in today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Rick, I just read your result, and your result has come back as preliminarily positive. Now, what we're going to need to do is run a confirmatory test to confirm whether this is a true positive result.
I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. I'm just going to go. I got to get out of here.
Okay, well, before you leave, I just gave you some really difficult information, and it would be good if maybe you could stay for a little bit and talk about it.
I don't know. I guess I knew that it could happen. You know, I messed around, and what else did I think could have happened? But I know all about HIV, and I don't think there's anything that I don't know. I just screwed up.
Okay, I know that this is some really difficult information to handle right now. What's the first thing that's going through your mind?
No offense, I know that you mean well, but I don't want to talk.
I completely understand, and I completely hear you, but there are some things that I'd like to talk to you about today before you leave. And if you don't want to share any information with me, if you don't want to open up to me, then that's completely fine. But there is some information that I'd like to give you before you leave, okay?
You know, you asked me what I was thinking, and I'm thinking that HIV just caught up with me. You know, my hopes of a long-term relationship, any kind of relationship, are over. If I want to live, I'll have to take medications, and then beyond that, I'm just going to be sick from the medications.
Okay, well, some people certainly do struggle with taking their medications, but that's not the case for everyone. And in fact, if your test does come back as positive, you might not even need to be on medications right away.
So what do you think that I should do?
Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is run a confirmatory test. This will let us know if your result truly is positive, because remember, this is just a preliminary result. The next thing that I can do is I can connect you with an HIV care coordinator at the HIV clinic. They're going to talk to you a little bit more about HIV and about how to fight the virus and to keep yourself healthy, okay?
Okay, let's just, let's do this next test, and then I'll decide from there.
Okay. And what are your plans for when you leave here today? Do you know what your next step is?
Well, I was supposed to call Denise, and I don't really know how I'm going to handle that.
Okay. Do you think that Denise will be supportive of you? Do you think that that's someone you can turn to?
Yeah, I mean, she's really supportive. You know, I know that she's going to cry, but I don't think that she's going to say, "I told you so."
Okay.
So.
Okay, well, that's really good to hear that you feel that Denise could be a good support system for you. The only thing I want to remind you is that once you tell somebody your status, you really can't take back that information. I know you know that. And if you feel like Denise is a good support system for you, that's fine. But the other thing to consider is that we don't even have your confirmatory results yet, so we don't actually truly know if you're HIV positive.
Yeah, she already knows how that works, so.
Okay. Also, we talked about ways that you could keep your risk as low as possible. So the thought was for you to have sex maybe in your own home where you're more in control. Does that sound like something?
You know, I don't even see myself having sex anymore because it's not worth the trouble.
Okay. Well, I certainly understand why you feel like you don't want to have sex again. But with most people with HIV come to realize that they can still have sex in safer ways. Remember, safer sex works just as well for people who have HIV as it does for those who don't.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't see myself going out again, so.
I completely understand, and I realize that suddenly making this kind of change overnight can be somewhat difficult. But it's usually a better idea to go ahead and try to make some smaller, achievable goals. What do you think about maybe instead of telling yourself that you can't have sex ever again, what about until you get your confirmatory results? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be in the mood to have sex anytime soon, so that won't be a problem.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and I know that you feel like that part of your life is over. That's completely understandable for you to feel that way. But hopefully you'll see soon that more and more people who have HIV are living well, and they're still capable of being in loving relationships without presenting any sort of risks to their partners. I realize that seems really unlikely for you to kind of understand right now or to want to even think about, but there's no reason for your dreams to change. During this waiting period, one thing that you might do is think about ways that you could take better control over the types of behaviors that you're having. So for example, bringing guys to your own place and your own turf, or maybe you could handle condom use in the same way that Danny does, just by kind of making it a casual thing.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I do appreciate what you're telling me, and you've definitely given me a lot to think about.
Okay. And now there's just one more thing I have to talk to you about, and it's just something to think about for right now until we get your confirmatory result. But that's notifying partners of yours who might also be at risk for HIV. Now that's not something that you need to think about right now. We haven't gotten your confirmatory result back yet. And if and when that time does come where we need to think about partner notification, there are healthcare professionals who can help you out with that. Your identity will never be revealed. It'll be completely anonymous, confidential,
Good.
but that's something that we do need to think about. as of right now. Is there anything else that I can help you with today before we do the test?
Nothing that I can think of right now, but can I call you if I need anything?
Absolutely. Feel free to call me at any point, and I'm still going to give you your lubricant samples to take home with you today. What we can do now is go ahead and start the confirmatory test, okay?
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
All right.
By keeping familiar with the CDC protocol for HIV prevention counseling, we can improve our ability to support individuals in making behavioral changes that will reduce their risks of acquiring or transmitting HIV. Remember to use the acronym CIGARS, where C stands for Client Introduction, I is for Identify Risks, G is for Go Behaviors, A is for Action Plan, R is for Referrals, and S is for Summarize. And practice using open-ended questions while exploring the risks and the safer go behaviors with the client. Thank you for playing such an important role in helping people discover and deal with their HIV status.